To the first side event here at the Cryos Pavilion. I'm Emma. I'll be introducing our speaker today. I'm a PhD student at the Alfred Wegener Institute and Ludwig Maximilians University of Munich, and I'm introducing CTO WR.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining these sessions and of those who are listening online. So last week we had a talk on mountain glaciers, but today I'm going to talk about the impacts of sea level rise. So this is the title, 1.5 degree to avoid Atlantis, Ice Code 2 on APAC cities, trade and finance. So for those who are not so familiar with CWR, we are a think tank based in Hong Kong. We've been helping the business and finance communities to unpack water and climate risk in the water, energy, and climate nexus. So we started out with writing a lot of reports for banks, and then later these reports were picked up by the Central Bank of China, who invited us to join the China Task Force on Environmental Risk Analysis. And today, this methodology on water risk valuation are recommended by the global standards and also included in the textbook. We also work with international policy think tanks like WRI and also IRENA on renewable power sectors, and which also got us to present our findings at the ministerial level meeting. And renewable energies need a lot of rare earth, which is why we write this report, which is also picked up by PRI, a Principle for Responsible Investments, which also tables rare earth as a risk. And the Chinese government also read our stuff and invited us to write a policy brief on the wateronomics of the Yangtze rivers. And since then, we also started to work with the Chinese Academy of Science to look at the river basin risk in the whole Asia, which is the 10th major river basin. We presented this last week. And we also deep dive into the Yangtze river basin. And clearly, this will have very serious implications for water security, which is why some of these are also included in the textbook for policymakers, which was published during COP26. And we are glad that these findings are also cited by the IPCC. And since 2020, we also started to focus on coastal flooding because these risks are accelerating. So we did a series of these reports, which are also recommended readings and in the global textbooks. We also published a series of lectures on Hong Kong sea level rise, on how you should look at the risk from a city perspective. We also work closely with financial institutions and also city planners on how to build resilience. So, climate change. Carbon is how we cause climate change, but water is actually how we feel climate change, like flood and drought. But today, I'm not going to talk about flood and drought because we know they are happening. So I'm going to focus on these slow-moving risks like sea level rise, because even these risks are moving faster. And in Asia, we are actually the most vulnerable to sea level rise. 200 million people will be at risk from just 1 meter of sea level rise. But sadly, we are not even at the table for discussion. And the IPCC warned that high-end sea level rise cannot be ruled out because by 2100 and 2150, 2 to 5 meters of sea level rise cannot be ruled out. So what on earth is this cannot be ruled out scenario? Because it's not just melting. This could also happen to Hong Kong. This is what cannot be ruled out look like for Hong Kong. So as you can see, Hong Kong is an international finance hub. So a lot of banks, building, and even finance center will be underwater under this scenario. So a lot of people think Hong Kong is healthy, so we are fine. But actually, Hong Kong is very vulnerable to sea level rise, because almost 1/3 of our population is clustered in this low-lying reclaimed land, which are coastal, and almost 70% of our economy or commercial activities are also clustered in this repayment. So we stress tested almost more than 195,000 assets in Hong Kong and published this series of fact sheets so that we can know how to protect sea level cities from sea level rise. So you need to look at this sea level rise from a holistic perspective. As you can see, more than 80% of our Hong Kong government revenues and 8 trillion of our import and export will be impacted by sea level rise. And it's not just that, almost 50% of our MTR exits and 50% of our water treatment plants are vulnerable to sea level rise. So clearly this is a water security issue. And we also stress tested the property on sales in the market, and 22% will be also impacted by sea level rise. So clearly, these are existential threats to Hong Kong. So should we start doing transformative resilience given so much at risk? And it's not just Hong Kong. Other cities are also at risk. So we created this index to benchmark coastal threat impacts for 20 APAC cities. And from Taipei, Macau to Hong Kong, Sydney, Jakarta, etc. And these index were inputted by more than 100 plus finance professionals. And this methodology was also included in the water risk model textbook in multiple areas. So clearly, understanding these risks are important because the risks are huge. As city exposure can trigger financial shocks. As you can see, Hong Kong and Singapore clearly are 100% of their GDP, but 3 cities in Japan already 1/3 of their GDP. And even Bangkok is 1/3 of the Thailand's GDP. So clearly, if your key cities are not safe, then you will have an impact on your sovereign risk because banks are going to increase your borrowing cost, which is why there's impetus for the government to act to reduce the risk. One is through decarbonization, and second is to adapt for these knock-in impacts. So, but adaptation needs a lot of money. Sadly, adaptation finance is, which is why the Singapore government invited us to curate seminars on how to raise adaptation finance. So they have a lot of money. So they asked us to pull together all these people from city planners, banks, insurers, to IPCC co-chairs, and even corporates to sit down and discuss how to stress test and also how to waterproof your city. But from this discussion, we still found there's some disconnect between science, cities, and finance, because science and cities, they want to protect the worst case scenarios, but finance, they are doing otherwise. So let me show you what it means. So Hong Kong central banks started to stress test, and they asked 27 banks to stress test their loan books to 0.5 meter of sea level rise. That included typhoon and flooding, and this is what they found. 32% of their portfolio will be impacted under these scenarios. But if you stress test to the these cannot be well scenarios like these photos in Hong Kong, this is the extra numbers of properties that could actually be impacted under these scenarios, which is why we all need to stress test right. If you cannot see this, then how are you going to prepare and stop this to happen? So we showcase these impacts in this report. And we also working with AIGCC, which is Asia Investor Group on Climate Change, to engage banks with this report, which is great because AIGCC is a powerful group because they are managing 28 trillion of worth of assets. And clearly, the chair of the AIGCC said that the current stress testing approach are still underestimating the sea level rise risk because either the time frame is too short or the sea level rise levels is too low, which is why we need to include these stress tests. Clearly, there are a lot at risk, which is why we all need to align our climate strategies. So of course, we need to aggressively decarbonize to stay below 1.5. But at the same time, we also need to do adaptation to 3 degrees because this is where we are currently heading to. So the best way to reduce water and financial risk is to slow down the ice melt. But we need a 43% cut of emissions in 5 years, which is not much time. So the question is, how can we capitalize these 24 gigatons of emissions to help slow down this ice melt and sea level rise? So in CWR, we are all about redefining this to catalyze opportunities, which is why we think it's important to rethink water and energy security and also to rethink the transition sectors for green finance. Which is why in 2024, we wrote this report in a bid to slow down the water risk. So we published this under the CWR Accelerator Threat Series. We have some of the reports here. If you are interested, you can get this report. So clearly, ICT is an emerging sector, but today I'm not going to focus on these sectors. I'm going to talk about the other 2 reports, which I'm going to show you how ice risk and also fast rising seas will strengthen the energy excellence. So clearly, oil is in for a crude awakening. So globally, this is how much the GHG emissions are from the oil sectors. And globally, 64% of oil is moved by ships, which is why we think it's important to write this report, which is called Crude Awakening. We stress tested 15 top tanker terminals, and we found that 12 of them will be underwater at just 1 meter of sea level rise, and 2 more will be underwater at 2 meters. So, which is why it's time to rethink oil, because it no longer provides energy security, but threatens to it. Because using more oil will have more carbon emissions, which will accelerate the ice melt and sea level rise. Another sectors that we think we can capitalize faster decarbonization is coastal power. So we wrote this report this year as well, and we stress tested coastal power for 3 North Asian countries, China, Japan, and South Korea. And we found that 65 gigawatts of their power assets are actually vulnerable to 1 meter of sea level rise. So these power assets can already power the whole of the resource. And of these, 44 gigawatts are actually coal-fired power plants, which is enough to power these ASEAN countries. So since we are going to be impacted by sea level rise, so should we early retire these coal-fired power plants so that we can also fast-track decarbonization? And not only just that, we also found that 18 to 24% of Japan and South Korea's solar capacity will be impacted by sea level rise, just 1 meter of sea level rise. So your clean energy portfolio will also be declining by coastal smelting, which is why we must rethink energy security, even the fast rising sea level rise. And those are sea level rise threats on power assets. And on the freshwater side, we think Himalayan water towers also matter for powers. So in case you missed our talk last week on mountain glaciers, so these are the rivers in Asia. And the empty hole here is actually the Himalayan water towers, which provide water to all these rivers. So we showcase the impacts of this in this report called No River, No Power, which we published last year. And we found that 865 gigawatts of power assets are actually clustered in East Asia 10 river basins. And 94% of them need water to use. Yet 330 gigawatts face high to extremely high water stress. And this amount is equivalent to the power assets of France, Germany, and the UK. So clearly, this will have different implications to different countries in terms of energy power security. So given next year is the International Year of Glacier Preservation, so we think we should rethink this ice risk in terms of rising sea as well as fresh water. So hopefully next year we can expand our work on oil and gas and coastal powers beyond North Asia to cover ASEAN countries. So I wish you can spread the word outside. If you're interested, you can also join us to work on to stop the melts. Hopefully, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Questions? Any questions? Oh, same. Yeah.
I got a difficult question.
Okay, people will answer.
Something which really struck me when you were talking, finance and risk assessment, they really care about this long time frame, taking risk and right.
Yeah.
From a policy perspective, communicating it, but again and again, they don't really care about what's making more relevant now. So, are there lessons you can learn from communicating to the finance and risk assessment? Apply like a policy world to make it relevant today. They can engage in all these long time frames on higher
Right. So the finance world doesn't just care about the short time frames, but it's the central banks that are caring about the slightly longer time frames. So there's two different things. So the institutional investors who are investing in banks clearly don't want the banks to collapse. So if you don't want the banks to collapse, then banks themselves don't clearly want to collapse. So the central bank is asking for longer time frames. But technically now it's still to 2050, 2070, 2100. In the report, you can sort of see that there's various ranges. So it depends if you're the Central Bank of UK, you could be doing one range. There's no set timing. So what we're asking for is banks to set the timing to 2100. And they could do 2100, 2070, and then 2050. So you can see the differences. Because what you don't want to do is spend money and then realize later on the sea level rise is going to be 2 to 3 meters if we don't manage to rein in emissions. And then all the money you've spent will go to waste. Yeah. So you should kind of like do it right up. So it's enough.
That was great talk, thank you. I was wondering, you mentioned both the need to mitigate the 1.5, but also to plan adaptation and free. Where do you see a balance in that? Or do you really think this adaptation could plan for that higher scenario regardless? And that evolve over time?
So I can tell you some Hong Kong experience. Right? So some government thinks that are so optimistic we can achieve like 1.5 to 2 degrees. So they also adapt to these levels of scenarios. But actually, at today's temperature, we already locked in a lot of impacts. And currently, saying is one thing, but doing is another, right? So we are heading to 3 degrees. We're not saying you must adapt to this level already today, but we're asking you must have a contingency plan. So in case this happens, can the current structures can be be flexible and add up to these levels?
Yeah, actually, there's a group called the Network for Green Financial Systems. It's made out of over 100 or so central banks, and this group is recommending the physical stress test. So you have to do your transition stress test to 1.5, but their physical stress test recommendations. So it's so that you can have a look at the risk, and obviously when you see this risk, we should want to push rapid decarbonization as fast as possible.
So we've been at COP now for a week. You see how slowly the progress is evolving. And the financial risks have to do more to push the policymakers back faster, or it's a robot.
Yeah, I still think there's a disconnect. Coming here, we realize there's also a disconnect between ice risks and water risks. people are worried about water risk. Ice risk is a little bit more remote. So, which is why we realized that our job is to connect the ice risk to the water risk. But then we also realized that the ice risk to the ocean risk is even more oceans apart. Right? And so putting that in, getting the money and having that as part of one conversation, I think that's the challenge. I think we can do this in the financial space because they just care about money as long as you put it in money terms. It's good. So I'll just share with you. I had a conversation with a banker, and I said to her, "You should read." This was literally last week. "You should read these." And she's like, "I'm too tired. If they had some money numbers on it, I would read them." Right? So I think in the future we need some money numbers on each of these. It doesn't need to be a fullest everything. It could just be, my high sheets. It will take out 12 of the top 15 tanker terminals, and this could disrupt the oil trade, which costs us trillions of dollars. It could be as simple as that. It's something that will make the bankers who walk by just stop and look at it. I don't know, maybe next year in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first point I'd like to make is that a lot of people can almost security going to the second point is we talked to the bank about dioxide removal methods and also solar radiation management. We know massive volcano cools a degree, half a degree, from 3 to 5 years. Right? We take some of the sulfur in the upper atmosphere of the Arctic, preserve the ice, and slow down sea level rise. So are you seriously, what is the view on these sort of ideas? Like, do you support research and
Okay, so we're not scientists,
Right.
so we will take from science to express what that findings will mean for.
Cambridge University has an inventor called Cambridge Climate Repair Center. They're scientists, and they look at all of these things, and they're providing techniques and ideas to do this, but they need funding. Banks and things. We support climate stocks, slow down sea level rise, and they need money to do research.
Yeah.
Right, there is more and more groups that are talking.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you for that. But our view is that there are ultra faster and easier games to sort of be made. So I think CT talked about the internet sector. The internet sector is growing like crazy. And with generative AI, that's going to up power use by 5 to 20 times. So in Asia, where data center growth is 25% per year, a lot of that new growth is going to come from hospitals. And we think that if there's a faster shortcut to a rapid decarb than relying on future tech that may or may not happen, I do not disagree that we should be investing in the science of that. But there's so much emissions on the table that we could take straight away. In the water sector alone, there's up to 10% of emissions from water supply, water treatment, and also methane and NOx from the treatment plants. And there's hardly any conversation of net zero water as it is. It's not even a transition sector. So we've placed the ICT, the internet sector as a transition sector for Hong Kong and China. So we could do the same for the rest, so that when banks lend to these sectors, just like for cement, I will say, is your data center going to be green? If it's not, then I'm not. These should be the questions. Yeah. So we're working on that, and if any of you want to join us, please do, and we'll take a look at the stuff.
Just 2 points in one side. So actually, in 1 hour's time, there is an event here titled "Saving Protecting the Further Reasons for Dangerous Geoengineering." For any of you interested in that, by coming along. we go through these around.
Where's the event?
Engineers want to investigate. Let them do their work.
I mean, we can talk. Yeah, we can talk. Second point is about the framing of 1.5. So we've not crossed 1.5, we're at 1.3 right now, which in May you'll see 1.5 yes. We're still long-term decadal average in terms of how the Paris Agreement sees this target. It's still scientifically feasible. And regardless of that, if you do exceed 1.5, you don't need to jump to extreme measure. If you apply every single factor of every category, because these systems respond more and more. You can't take off the gas in terms of emission reduction. And these ideas do potentially take some people who've seen this at this problem, their attention away from decarbonisation towards other ideas making a
So I'd like to echo that. I think, it's 5 years, right? Can we do that in 5 years? I don't know. But what we can do is we can definitely, the oil sector will shoot themselves in the foot. I heard this last week, yesterday on permafrost. And, the other 1/3 of oil is transported by pipelines, right? And they're all sitting in the tundra, etc. And that's also going to collapse. So these will happen sooner than we think. And we think that, that should be a conversation because that's 11 gigatons. Right there. Coastal power is probably globally 3 to 5 gigatons. It's our estimate, but we don't know because we haven't calculated that. If that power plant is going to be underwater 2050, 2070, you might as well take that out and do something else now. With water, that's another 4 to 10%. That's another 5 gigatons, right? And so altogether, I think that, and the ICT sector is 4% of global emissions. So it's just that those sectors which have the money to transition, and it's country agnostic. So there's no politics. It's just about economics. That's pretty much 24 gigatons, right? We can actually do it, but we just need to sort of reframe the economic conversation, and we need to bring the ice risks to the table. Because I don't think that people understand it. It's complex, and it's not dumbed down to a level enough for the ADD bankers who only look at one flat sheet to sort of say, I get it, and I'm off. Yeah.
It would take a miracle for about a month and a half left. And June of last year, we've had entire months that are 1.75. Nothing happened in the next month and a half. And the control rate
Just to add to what you were saying, there are other risks of the ocean economy that are not solved also by those technologies. For example, anything that relies on the ocean acidification, right? Yeah. So the acidification of the ocean will continue as long as we pump CO2, and even if we prevent the warming, anything that is going to be affected by acidification is not going to be stopped by those technologies.
I think it's really, like when we're discussing climate, I think it's really to separate whether there's availability of we would say that as a 1.5 in the topic of climate change. That's the only message where, and it's driven, you also nature there's shipping by the ocean. The reduction of sulfur there's fewer clouds in the ocean, meaning that skyrocket in the northern hemisphere, contributing to this rapid migration. Right, that's geoengineering. There's a sign intent about the definition of very whether any statistics frequency, severity, and duration of extreme weather events is right?
All I can sort of say is that, climate change science is evolving and discourse is natural. But to the bank, I'm an ex-banker, right? So to the bankers, this just means that I just don't want to rely on anything. And I think that's also the dangerous. So when we try to unpack these ISIS, this is why we find ICCI state of prior spirit so useful, because it's kind of like a lot of very hard to read scientific summarized in a simple manner, but even then, I would sort of say that I maybe only know 2 or 3 guys who actually read that report. Right? Everybody else would need that done down even more. And so, as we realized this, and so as we wanted to publish a set of fact sheets, so it's really, really dumb, right? Like Antarctica, one fact sheet, right? One side, like stats or whatever, and then have this handed out, because what we realized was when we published these fact sheets, literally chairmen of large companies and CEOs, that's the level that is reacting to it, right? And once they understand, they are the ones that are pushing us now. What's happening to sea level rise, right? And so that dialogue is important, and we need to start that. And I agree with you. I don't have much faith in the politics at the moment. However, I think it's technically possible to hover at 1.5, if not overshoot, but just for a short time. So maybe business and money can react, because they would lose a lot of money if they don't.
We also have to look at where would we be actions on climate return. 29 talks, people say it hasn't done anything, but it would be a much higher temperature, much higher CO2 level now. We've done quite a bit.
When we did the sea level rise coastal threat index, and we surveyed over 100 investors who actually what I urge you to read Avoiding Atlantis. So we made the methodology transparent, and you could see the financial guys reply. So they were quite interesting. So they all agreed on consensus on this kind of valuation methodology. We don't know this, but when we want to see X, so we'd like to see the range of Y, but all of them were like, we are at 3 to 4 degrees, right? So we did this in 2000. They were already thinking it's going to be 4 degrees. So they're in that way realistic about things, and when they're realistic and you can show them or translate the faster moving biosphere risks, they would respond quickly because it is their assets. Yeah. But thank you. Not the lively discussion. Thank you. We have some people
有电子版的，
but they're also all
有全部都有电子版，
要什么
可以 scan。
？PPT 上应该是有这个，你们的网站就有吧？
网上是有，你搜索那个，你要的话我就 send 那个，如果你找不到你就问我。